So my message today is, what are you worth? It's a question that sometimes we don't ask ourselves. And just recently I actually had to ask myself that same question. And time again I've actually asked myself that question of what am I worth? We end up going through our lives, we end up having all these things that we end up seeing. We all see our imperfections, we see all these things that happen in our lives, we see what other people are doing, we see all the negativity, we see everything that's going on besides what is inside ourselves, of what potential that we actually have. And the way I look at it is, in my experience as a personal banker, I actually started working as a personal banker a couple of years ago. I ended up actually realizing that sometimes it's not the way that you actually see things, it's the potential of what there is inside. As an example, why do people end up putting money in stocks? It's just taking a little bit of money just to put it in, right? But it's thinking about what potential there is by putting that money in. And that's what God wants us to do. He wants us to take that little bit that we have and put it in. And every time you put a little bit in, it has potential to be able to become that much more. So every little bit that you're putting in, it starts to grow. Take that little bit more, put a little bit in, it starts to grow. And it gets to the point where you can retire because you're putting in so much that you have a good amount to be able to actually say, okay, this is what I'm worth now. A good example of that, and it's as a struggle, as an everyday struggle that we actually all have, it's a good example in the Bible that actually talks about the talents. God actually ended up giving 3 people talents. He gave 5 to one, he gave 2 to another, and he gave 1 to the other. The one that had 5, he ended up taking it, probably threw in some stocks, ended up multiplying it to 10. The one that had 2, he probably ended up taking, let's say he bought himself a car with it, sold it, made double. Now he had 4. The one that had a single one, just one, he had just 1 talent. What did he do? He buried it. And sometimes that's what we do. We take the talents that God has given us and we bury it. Why? Because we don't feel like we're worth anything. And that's something that we do have to overcome. And that's something that even for myself I've had to be able to overcome. And every day we have to end up overcoming. Once you've actually realized what you're worth, then you can actually see, like the Bible says, see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. If we're children of God, there's no reason at all for us to be able to say, I'm not worth anything. I can't do this. I can't do that. Because you know why? Because we're the children of God. If we're children of God, then we can do anything. There's nothing that can end up holding us back from what we can do. And it's something that I want the youth to be able to understand as well, because even in myself, there's been times where I'm like, can I do this? Even today, I was struggling. I'm like, come preach today here? That's crazy. No way. But you know what? I realized I'm like, it took for me to actually go through the whole process of everything to actually realize, you know what? I can do this. You know why? Because I'm worth more by me doing this. Because I'm actually taking that talent and I'm putting that talent in. Because I'm investing in my own stocks. Are you guys investing in your own stocks? Alright. Once you actually know what you're worth, the next step is actually receiving only the best. And that's, I think, one thing that we all can end up saying that we sometimes settle. We can settle at our jobs. We can settle in our relationships. We can even settle in church. Just sitting down, okay, I'm here, I'm at church today. I've been coming to church every single day this week. I come to church every single day. I go to work every single day. I go to school every single day. But do you really feel like you are actually receiving the best? Are you giving the best to get to the best? It takes for us to be able to actually make that effort to be able to actually receive the absolute best. Example of that. Right now, I'm actually working as an audio engineer. I do concerts, I do conventions, I do a lot of stuff that has to do with sound and all this fun stuff. I know sometimes you guys have seen my pictures on Facebook. Oh yeah. And for me to actually get to this point, I've actually had to invest in myself in order to receive the best. I've actually had to overcome not knowing, and that's one thing that a lot of people end up having to struggle with. The fact of not knowing. Praise you, Jesus. The Bible actually says in Matthew 7:8, "For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. To him who knocks it will be opened." Sometimes it takes just for us to ask for us to be able to receive. I've actually, when I used to work at the bank, that was one thing that I actually used to love to do. Even though it was kind of scary sometimes, I actually would end up being daring enough to be like, you know what? I'm worth more than what I'm getting paid right now. I'm worth more than just in this position I'm in right now. And I would take that chance and I'd be like, you know what, God? I leave it in your hands, but I believe I'm worth more. I'm going to end up taking that step, and I'm going to end up trying to get to the next position. And I have to say that I was blessed enough to be able to actually get 3 promotions. In 4 years that I was working there, I received 3 promotions. And that was only because I believed that I was worth more. I believed that I was worth the absolute best. But it took for me to actually ask to be able to receive. If you don't ask, you don't receive. You can end up having everything. But it takes that one thing for you to ask. And then once you've actually asked, the biggest thing to be able to do next is to expect only the best. Sometimes we end up letting circumstances dictate our decisions. One example is actually not lack of knowledge or understanding. If I didn't end up applying myself to go to school to be able to learn what I actually did with audio and everything, I wouldn't have the job that I currently have right now. It took for me to be able to take that step to be able to say, you know what, even though I'm kind of lazy, even though I know school's super expensive, even though I know it's going to take so many years for me to actually do what I want to do, I'm going to actually do it. I'm not going to end up letting me not knowing what I need to do dictate what my future is going to end up being. Another thing is actually not negativity. That was one thing that I struggled with many, many times. Even when I was going to school, I had people telling me, "Oh, why are you going to school? What's the point of going to school? You're going for audio? What? Audio? Are you serious? How are you going to get a job in audio? Who works in audio? I don't know anyone that works in audio." But it was something that I wanted to do. And there was times, I actually have to say, there was times that I actually felt where I actually wanted to quit school. But I was like, you know what? How do I expect to receive the best if I'm not putting in that step? I have to give the best to receive the best. Another thing, and this is actually, I have to say this is for adults as well, is financial pressures. Sometimes because we need the job that we just need, income, we're going to end up staying at the job that we're at. We're going to end up dealing with all the craziness that's going on at that job. We can be the most unhappiest person in the world, but we're not going to take that step to go somewhere else. Why? Because we know that we need that money. We don't want to take a chance of something not working out at another job. And I'm actually at the same crossroads right now. I thank God. It's one of those situations where it's nerve-wracking, but I actually have the opportunity to be able to choose my decision as to where I want to actually work. I actually was without a job for 2 years. I don't know if you guys actually knew about that. Just recently I started working for this audio company. And I thank God every single day, every moment of every day, that He helped me out through those 2 years. Because it was a struggle. 2 years of dealing with unemployment and all these battles. One thing that I do say though is even during that time, I was offered many jobs. And I was like, you know what? I'm sorry, babe, I love you very much. I know we need the income and everything, but I'm not going to let that dictate anything. I expect the best. If I'm going to end up doing my best, I'm going to expect the best. I'm not going to end up taking some job just because I need this money, just because we need to have a roof over our heads. I'm going to believe in God, I'm going to trust in God, and I'm going to keep on pushing. I'm going to keep on applying to these jobs that I know that I can end up getting. Because I know that I'm worth that much more. I'm worth this much. And I'm not going to let financial difficulties dictate that. One thing that we actually need to learn to do is how to overcome. And that's one thing that's very, very hard to do. We have to overcome fears. Is it possible? We end up thinking about all the negativity. Am I going to be able to get that job? Am I going to be able to make it? What happens if I don't end up making it? Am I going to be able to afford these bills? What's going to happen for the youth? What's going to happen if I end up going up front and I don't know what to say? Am I going to be able to actually remember the words to this song? Am I going to be talked about because I actually took that step to be able to try to do something different? Are people going to criticize me? It's things that happen to us. And that's something that we need to overcome. We need to be able to overcome that fear. We need to also be able to overcome pressures. Should I just give up? Should I settle with what I have? Just because I end up seeing all the negativity that's going on around me. We also have sometimes doubt. Will I be able to do it? Can I do it? Am I smart enough to do it? Am I able to do it? Am I going to have the finances to do it? And sometimes we get so frustrated that we end up asking Jesus, why? Why, God? Why is it that I can't get to what I want? Why is it that me knowing what I'm worth, I don't have what I want? And we start getting anxious. We ask, when? When is it going to happen? Throughout the 2 years that I was unemployed, I was asking God, when am I going to end up receiving this job that I expect? I expect a great job, but when is it going to happen, Lord? 2 years going by, every single day, applying, not hearing nothing. And God was like, you know what? Okay, don't worry, just take it easy. It's going to happen. A perfect example of that in the Bible actually talks about, it actually talks about Joseph in the Bible, Genesis chapter 50. At a glance, we actually see that Joseph has no hope when we first look at Joseph. He was hated by his brothers. He was separated from his family. He was sexually harassed by his boss's wife. He was falsely accused of a crime that he didn't even do. And then after all of that, he was thrown in prison and completely forgotten about. And sometimes we feel the same exact way. We feel like we've been completely forgotten about. We feel like the people around us have completely forgotten about us. We feel like God has completely forgotten about us. Our friends have completely forgotten about us. Our families have completely forgotten about us. But Joseph's life was a series of temporary setbacks. And sometimes that's what ends up happening with us. We just have temporary setbacks. That's how life works, unfortunately. But one thing that was different about Joseph was his attitude. And his attitude was that he trusted God. Every moment that he ended up going through his trials, through every setback that he had, every setback, he's like, you know what? I'm still going to believe in God. I'm still going to trust that God is going to end up giving me the absolute best. I know that I'm worth more than just being a slave here. I know that I'm worth more than being a prisoner here. And what ended up happening? He ended up being up here because he believed that he was worth to be up here. And one thing that we can actually end up thanking God for is that once we've actually gone through all this crazy mess, he sometimes gives us the opportunity to be able to choose what blessing you want. Now the question is, do you want gold or do you want diamonds? The only catch is, if you want the diamonds, you're going to have to work for the diamonds. You can get the gold. The gold's there. How much do you want to work to get the diamonds now? Are you worth diamonds or are you just worth gold? Either way, they're both great blessings. I mean, who's going to complain about gold, you know? I mean, I wouldn't. But are you worth diamonds? So I leave the question to you guys. How much are you worth? What are you worth? What I ask is for every one of you guys to really think about that message. Think about what it is that you can actually do in your everyday life, in your church life, in your spiritual life, in your financial life, in your emotional life, in your relationships that you guys have. Think about what it is that I'm worth. Am I just going to settle in this job? Am I going to settle just sitting down and just going every day the same way? Am I going to stand up and am I going to actually do something besides just sitting around and watching life go by? So I ask you all, what are you worth? Okay, if we can all rise, please.